The movie that made grown men faint in theaters, priests sprinkle holy water on projectors, and horror go from popcorn fun to soul-rattling fear. But what most people don't know is this movie wasn't just cursed on screen. Behind the screams, spinning heads, and crab walking downstairs, the production of The Exorcist was more chaotic, haunted, and downright bizarre than anything the devil himself could have cooked up. These are 20 weird facts about The Exorcist, a horror film so terrifying, the true horror might have been everything that happened behind the camera. Number 1. It didn't start with a scream, it started with smoke. One morning, the crew arrived on set to find the McNeil house had burned. Not a little fire, not some light damage, a full blaze. The lighting rig was gone, walls scorched, set dressing reduced to ash, cameras melted, a total loss. Production shut down for 6 weeks, but one room had survived. Regan's bedroom, not untouched, unscathed, spotless, as if the fire had avoided it on purpose. The official cause was chalked up to a rogue pigeon shorting out the ceiling lights. But ask anyone who was there, and they'll tell you that explanation didn't sit right. How does an electrical fire tear through every corner of a soundstage and leave the most cursed room completely intact? The one where the bed levitated, the girl screamed obscenities in a demon's voice, and Faith was torn apart? They didn't rebuild the set without protection. Friedkin brought in a real priest. Holy water was sprinkled. Prayers were said, quietly, without cameras. Because even if you don't believe in curses, when the devil's bedroom is the last thing standing in a wall of flame, you start wondering what stayed behind to protect it, or worse, what didn't want to leave. Number 2. It's one of the most medically accurate scenes ever put to film. A cerebral angiogram performed on young Regan. Her neck pierced by a thick needle, blood spurting in short arterial bursts. There's no demon here, no head turning, just cold equipment, fluorescent lights, and sterile horror. It unsettled audiences more than the exorcism itself, but the real terror was standing just off camera. Paul Bateson, the technician in the scene, wasn't an actor. He was a real X-ray tech at New York University Medical Center. His movements were perfect because he'd done them hundreds of times before. But years after the film's release, Bateson was arrested for the brutal murder of a journalist. He admitted it casually. No remorse. Then things got darker. Police linked him to a series of killings, dismembered bodies dumped in trash bags around Manhattan's gay community. He was never convicted for those, but the rumor persisted. Friedkin even used the case as inspiration for his later film Cruising, starring Al Pacino. It changes everything. One of The Exorcist's most disturbing scenes doesn't just feel real. It was a real procedure, a real man, and later, a real killer. Not an actor playing a monster briefly playing himself. Number 3. The first time the crew heard it, they thought it was the air conditioning. A low hum, like breath caught in metal. But when it happened again and again, only during the demon scenes, they started listening closer. What they heard wasn't mechanical, it was alive. In the mixing booth, editors reported distorted tapes, overlapping voices, phantom glitches. Playback machines rewound without being touched. Names were whispered through static. One engineer swore someone said his name, clear as day, when no one else was in the room. They blamed old equipment. Friedkin smiled. He said it added character, but the sound didn't stop. It pulsed under the film like a second voice, uninvited. The most unsettling thing? It only occurred during the Pazuzu sessions, never during Regan's innocent scenes, never during the church sequences, only when the devil was speaking. By week 3, no one wanted to stay late. Some refused to work alone. It wasn't just creepy, it was targeted, as if something inside the film didn't want to be edited, as if the tape itself had a will. You can't record a soul. But they tried, and maybe something screamed back. Number 4. Most horror movie curses are marketing. A missing reel, a flickering light, a shadow caught in a behind-the-scenes photo. But The Exorcist had numbers. By the end of production, 9 people tied to the film were dead. Jack McGowan, who played the drunken director Burke Dennings, died of pneumonia shortly after finishing his scenes. Ironically, his character also dies.
You damn butchering nuts.
A night watchman died on set. A lighting technician, Linda Blair's grandfather, Max von Sydow's brother. Even actors' pets were reportedly found dead under strange circumstances. Some were elderly, others weren't. But it kept happening. People stopped brushing it off. The tension got so thick that Friedkin called in a priest to bless the set. Not once, but twice. Cameras were sprinkled with holy water. Actors stood in silence. Even skeptics crossed themselves, just in case. It wasn't just a feeling. It was death that left fingerprints. Silent ones. With each passing week, another body fell. Off-screen, out of frame, but tethered to the production. Whether you believe in curses or not, something followed that crew. And it didn't wait for the credits to roll. Number 5. Mercedes McCambridge was a trained actress, an Oscar winner, and by all accounts, unshakable. But when she was cast as the voice of the demon in The Exorcist, she transformed. Not just her voice, her body. Her process went beyond performance. She became the sound of possession. She began smoking again, chain smoking between takes to roughen her voice. She swallowed raw eggs to create a thick, phlegmy rasp, but it wasn't enough. She needed to sound like something trapped, so she asked the sound team to strap her down. Literally, they bound her arms and torso to a chair, tied her down with leather belts. She thrashed against it, howled into the mic until she sounded like a thing clawing its way out of hell. The hardest part, McCambridge was newly sober, and she gave it up. She drank whiskey before every session to get her throat just right. The demon's voice, those famous snarls, growls, and guttural roars, were born from broken sobriety and physical torment. She sacrificed her body, her voice, her recovery, and when it came time to credit her, Friedkin didn't. At first, her name was left out of the final cut, the most terrifying voice in cinema, nearly silenced behind the curtain. Like the demon itself, uncredited, unseen, but unforgettable. Number 6. By week 7, even the skeptics were starting to sweat. The fire, the unexplained sounds, the onset injuries, the deaths. It stopped feeling like a movie shoot and started feeling like something was pressing down on everyone's chest.
You want to loosen the straps, son.
People spoke in whispers between takes. Crew walked faster through the studio. The air felt charged, like standing in the middle of a thunderstorm that hadn't struck yet. So William Friedkin made a call. He didn't believe in curses, but he believed in morale. He brought in Father Thomas Birmingham, a real Jesuit priest. Not as an actor, though he played one in the film, but as a man of faith. He didn't make a scene of it. No cameras, no interviews, just a quiet mass at dawn. A few cast and crew stood by while Birmingham walked through the soundstage, sprinkling holy water and muttering prayers in Latin. Some laughed it off, others cried. After the blessing, the cameras stopped breaking. The tension eased. People said the air felt lighter. Friedkin dismissed it publicly, but privately, he had the priest return a second time, because maybe the devil wasn't real, but something was. And if a little holy water could keep it from showing up again, no one was going to argue. Number 7. William Friedkin didn't trust acting, not when it came to fear. He wanted something primal, something unscripted. So when he needed a jump from Jason Miller, Father Karras, he didn't shout action. He fired a gun, behind the camera, no warning. The blast cracked through the soundstage, echoing through the metal rafters. Miller flinched, hard, his eyes wide, mouth half open, caught between rage and confusion. The take was perfect. Friedkin smiled. Miller did not. He threatened to quit on the spot, but Friedkin had a reputation. He slapped a priest to get a trembling reaction. He lied to actors, rewrote lines mid-shoot, and called emotional manipulation part of the craft. For him, fear wasn't something you acted. It was something you extracted, like a demon. And he was the Exorcist. It worked. The film is soaked in terror so raw it feels contagious. But it came at a cost. The trust between director and actor was gone, and in a movie about possession, Friedkin's obsession with realism proved that sometimes the scariest thing behind the camera was the one calling the shots. Number 8. It wasn't just a premiere, it was a collective breakdown. On opening night, The Exorcist didn't just play, it detonated. Inside the darkened theater, something unhinged. Viewers fainted in their seats. Some ran into the aisles vomiting. One woman collapsed so hard she broke her jaw on the floor, and later sued the studio. Ambulances were called to multiple screenings, not as a gimmick, as a necessity. Theaters began handing out barf bags with tickets. Ushers were trained on how to deal with mass panic. Outside, priests passed out pamphlets warning of demonic influence. In Washington, protesters formed prayer circles in front of box offices. Across the country, pastors told their congregations not to go. Satan lived in the projector they warned. And what happened next? It became the biggest horror film in history. Lines stretched around the block. Tickets sold out for weeks. People didn't care that it made them sick. They wanted to be changed. They wanted to see the thing everyone said they shouldn't. The audience came for terror and left with something they couldn't shake. Because The Exorcist didn't just scare you, it possessed the room. Number 9. You don't forget the sounds of The Exorcist. Not the screams, the snarls, the wet, choking rage of something trying to claw its way through a child's throat. But none of those came from a demon. They came from pigs, dogs, bees, babies, and one man sitting in a dark sound booth, layering madness. Sound designer Ron Nagel didn't use stock effects. He built every shriek from scratch. He recorded the guttural squeal of a pig being slaughtered, the buzz of swarming insects, a baby's wail, slowed down until it sounded ancient. Then he played them backward, twisted their pitch, stitched them together like patchwork skin. One sound in particular became infamous, a baby cry overlaid with a pig's death squeal, reversed and echoed until it became unrecognizable. It didn't make sense, and that's what made it terrifying.
Somnambuliform possession.
Friedkin called it subconscious horror. You didn't know why it unsettled you. You just knew something felt wrong. Today, sound editors study The Exorcist like sacred scripture, because horror isn't just about what you see, it's what you hear. And when you hear something that shouldn't exist, something between species, between machines, between emotions, you don't forget it, because deep down, you recognize it from somewhere older than fear. Number 10. Before The Exorcist was a film, before it was a novel, it was a case file. 1949, Maryland. A 14-year-old boy. The church called him Roland Doe, a pseudonym used to protect the child's identity. He spoke in Latin. Objects flew across the room. Scratch marks appeared on his chest. His voice changed. One priest passed out during the ritual. Another claimed he saw furniture move on its own. William Peter Blatty discovered the case while researching miracles at Georgetown. He wasn't a horror writer. He was a theology major. And what he read shook him. It didn't feel like folklore. It felt like a warning. The possession had lasted months. The exorcism was brutal, and the church didn't want it publicized. So Blatty fictionalized it, changed the boy to a girl, moved it to Washington. But the bones of the story, the suffering, the spiritual warfare, the uncertainty, were real. And what terrified him most? It wasn't that a child might have been possessed. It was that he didn't know for sure. Something happened. Something the church confirmed behind closed doors and then buried in a locked drawer. The movie scared millions, but for Blatty, it was a sanitized version. The real story, that stayed hidden in the dark. Number 11. You can measure a movie's power by how fast it gets banned. And The Exorcist didn't just raise eyebrows, it raised alarms. Countries like Singapore, Lebanon, and large parts of the UK outright banned it. Too graphic, too blasphemous, too dangerous. In Britain, it was swallowed by the video nasty panic, a wave of censorship that treated VHS tapes like biological threats. But the ban didn't kill the film. It mutated it. Bootleg copies were passed around like forbidden relics. Friends whispered about it in schoolyards. Basement screenings became urban legends. Kids watched it on grainy tapes with the volume low, terrified their parents, or something else, would walk in. Even priests condemned it during sermons, warning that watching the film was an invitation. But the warning only fed the legend. The church's outrage turned The Exorcist into something more than a horror film. It became a test, a line you crossed to prove you were brave, or stupid, or ready for something dark to follow you home. The devil may have been banned, but he never needed a passport, just a VHS deck, a flickering screen, and the kind of silence that follows you after you hit eject. Number 12. At first, no one noticed. One or two buzzing around the lights. Maybe something left open on the craft table. But by the second week of exorcism scenes, the flies were impossible to ignore. They gathered near the lights, crawled across camera lenses, died in clusters on the floor. Crew swept up piles every morning, only to find more by lunch. Some blamed the rotting smell of the pea soup vomit. Others blamed the ice-cold set, which created condensation. But nothing explained why the flies only showed up around Regan's room. They weren't in the hallways or the dressing rooms, just that bedroom, chilled to sub-zero, sealed airtight, yet somehow alive with buzzing. Even Friedkin noticed. Biblical plague, someone joked. No one laughed. In demonology, Beelzebub is known as the Lord of the Flies. Coincidence? Sure. But try brushing one off your script notes after a night shoot in the possessed girl's bedroom, and see if you don't start wondering. Something about those flies didn't feel like nature. It felt like a gathering, as if something ancient had smelled what they were filming, and showed up to watch. Number 13. Not every version of The Exorcist ended with Father Karras hurling himself out the window. In the early drafts, it wasn't the priest who died. It was Regan, her body broken, her soul lost, evil triumphant. William Peter Blatty, the novelist and screenwriter, originally believed that was the most honest ending. That sometimes evil wins. That sometimes innocence is just collateral. But Friedkin pushed back. He wanted sacrifice, not surrender. He argued that without even a sliver of hope, the story wouldn't linger. It would just depress. So they rewrote it. They gave Karras the fall, gave Regan her soul back, gave the audience something to breathe through the darkness. You're not my mother! Still, the decision haunted production. Was it honesty they lost, or cruelty they avoided? That window dive became iconic, but behind it was a bigger question. What if Regan had died? What if the film ended in silence? With no holy water, no redemption, just a girl lost to something no one could name. Maybe it would have made a stronger horror film, or maybe it would have made something worse. Something that didn't just scare people, but broke them. The devil didn't win, but it was close. Number 14. Hundreds of girls auditioned for The Exorcist. Most of them cried through the script. Some couldn't even finish it. Their parents pulled them out halfway through callbacks. The material was too graphic, too violent, too wrong. Then came Linda Blair, calm, casual, and weirdly funny. When asked if she knew what demonic possession was, she smirked and said, "Yeah, like when the devil makes you curse a lot." They laughed. Then she read, and no one laughed again. Her audition wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was disturbingly flat, emotionless, the kind of calm you only hear before something terrible happens. She didn't scream, she stated. She didn't act scared, she acted possessed. And in that moment, the team knew. They weren't just casting a child. They were about to hand over the entire film to someone who barely understood what it meant. She got the part. But the moment the cameras started rolling, it stopped being a joke. Blair wasn't pretending. She was channeling something dark, even if she didn't know it. The crucifix scene, the demon voice, the dead-eyed stares, people called it acting, but some on set still wonder if it was something else, something borrowed, something she never fully gave back. Number 15, Pazuzu wasn't just a prop. He was the face of the film's evil, that ancient fanged demon statue seen in the film's Iraq prologue. Arms outstretched, mouth frozen in an eternal scream, was crafted in Italy, shipped to Nineveh for filming. It was massive, heavy, sacred, and when the crew arrived to shoot, it was gone. No trace, no records, just missing. Theories flew. Stolen by locals, lost in customs, buried by sandstorms? Whatever the cause, the production had to scramble. A second statue was carved and flown in at the last second. They got the shots they needed, but years later, something strange surfaced. Locals claimed the original was found, half buried in desert dunes, its face cracked but intact. It had been there the whole time, watching, waiting. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened. The statue was just absorbed by the land, by history, or maybe by something else, something older, something that didn't like being moved. It's just a statue, they said, a chunk of resin and paint. But Pazuzu wasn't written into The Exorcist as a metaphor. He was a real demon from ancient texts, a bringer of famine, disease, plague, and apparently someone who doesn't like being shipped freight. Number 16, there's a moment in The Exorcist where Chris McNeil, Regan's mother, gets slapped hard and flies backward across the room. She crashes to the floor with a sharp, agonizing scream, the kind of scream that pierces bone. Audiences gasped at her pain, but it wasn't acting. That scream was real. That pain was permanent. Ellen Burstyn was rigged to a wire harness for the stunt, just a standard pull from a stuntman to simulate the force. But Friedkin, chasing something authentic, told the crew to yank harder. No warning, no second take. She was ripped off her feet, slammed into the floor, and didn't get up. Her vertebra was damaged. She still feels it today. And the scream, the one that came out of her, unscripted, raw, torn from her lungs without preparation, that's the one Friedkin kept. Not the rehearsed one, not the safe one. The one where Ellen Burstyn was actually hurt. Later, Burstyn said she felt betrayed, not by the demon, not by the role, but by the man behind the camera who chose to capture her real pain and package it as horror. She was injured, maybe forever, and no one called cut, because the director already had what he wanted, the sound of someone breaking. Number 17. When The Exorcist premiered, Linda Blair became a household name, but not in the way child stars dream about. She was just 12, but people didn't see her as an actress. They saw her as a vessel, as evil, as the devil's mouthpiece. One moment, she was an unknown kid. The next, she was a national obsession and a target. Churches denounced her. Parents wrote hate mail. Strangers screamed at her in public. She received death threats. Warner Brothers assigned her a bodyguard. And in the middle of all this chaos, Linda was just trying to go back to middle school.
Backyard, and we had a picnic down by the river.
The worst part? She didn't even understand what she had done. Her innocence was sacrificed at the altar of realism. She didn't just play a possessed girl. She was possessed by the role itself. It followed her for life. And while the demon was cast out of Regan, it never really left Linda. Number 18. Remember that radiologist who turned out to be a serial killer? The one calmly performing a medical procedure in The Exorcist like it was just another Tuesday? This was the scene. The cerebral angiography. No demons, no possession. Just Regan lying on a table while Paul Bateson, yes, that Paul Bateson, slides a thick needle into her neck, drawing spurts of blood with horrifying precision. For audiences in 1973, this was the scene that pushed them over the edge. The steady click of the machine, the hiss of oxygen, the emotionless dialogue. It wasn't movie horror, it was clinical horror, unavoidable, unblinking. And Friedkin wanted it that way. He didn't cast actors, he used real medical equipment, real technicians, real blood effects that felt disturbingly close to the real thing.
Now, Regan, you're gonna feel something a little bit cold and wet.
Because in some ways, they were. The authenticity worked too well. People fainted, walked out. One woman collapsed so violently she broke her jaw on the theater floor. Friedkin later said he loved it. He didn't need monsters to scare his audience. Just a needle, a killer hiding in plain sight, and a cold fluorescent glow. In a film haunted by demons, it was the one scene without the supernatural that made people lose their minds. Because sometimes reality is the real possession. Number 19. The levitating bed. It's one of the most famous shots in horror history. Regan writhing as the mattress bucks beneath her, possessed by something ancient. But during one take, the bed didn't stop. The hydraulics locked, the mechanism jammed, and the rig kept slamming up and down, harder than intended. Linda Blair was strapped in. She screamed. Not in character, in pain. The crew scrambled to shut it down, but it kept shaking. Some say it took nearly 40 seconds to regain control, enough time for real damage to happen.
And let my cry come unto thee.
Blair's back was bruised. She had trouble standing after. Production paused for hours. The weirdest part, the rig had been tested a dozen times that day. No issues, no glitches, but the moment the camera rolled, chaos. Friedkin called it technical turbulence, but Blair later admitted she was terrified. Not of the malfunction, but of how no one reacted fast enough, like they were frozen, like something wanted them to watch. The scene made it into the film. The screams, the tension, they're real. What possessed Regan on screen might have been fiction, but for that one take, the fear was absolutely authentic. Number 20. The crucifix scene is infamous. Regan clutching the cross, jamming it between her legs, shrieking obscenities that still echo 50 years later. It shocked the world. And it nearly didn't happen. The original script described a vulgar act, but what they shot was far more extreme. The idea wasn't Friedkin's. It came from Blatty's novel, but on set, there was tension. Linda Blair was just a child. The implications were enormous, so they choreographed it carefully, rehearsed it in pieces. They used a body double for wide shots. Blair didn't fully grasp what the scene meant, but some crew walked off that day. The priest on set refused to enter the room during filming. The camera operator reportedly broke into a cold sweat. Later, Warner Brothers considered cutting it entirely, but Friedkin fought for it, said it was essential to the possession. To this day, the scene is studied, censored, debated. It's the moment The Exorcist went beyond horror and into sacrilege, not because of what it showed, but because of what it dared to imply. A sacred symbol turned weapon, innocence obliterated. And when the devil speaks through a child holding a cross, the horror isn't in the gore, it's in the silence afterward. The Exorcist wasn't just a film, it was a cultural earthquake. A movie that scared people out of theaters, into churches, and deep into their own fears. Behind every scream was a sacrifice. Behind every shadow, a real story. And behind every legendary scene, a dozen things that almost went horribly wrong. Whether you believe it was cursed, blessed, or just brutally honest filmmaking, one thing is clear. The Exorcist didn't just show us the devil. It showed us how far we'd go to make people believe he was real. If these behind-the-scenes horrors pulled back the veil for you, hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into iconic horror movies, and drop a comment below for which horror movie we should unravel next. Your nightmares might just inspire our next episode.